Doctors just told Prince Harry he's living on borrowed time, his brain is deteriorating, and the alleged cause is far more sinister than anyone imagined. The palace walls have stood for centuries, keeping the world out and the secrets in. But what happens when one of its most beloved sons steps outside those walls, only to find himself unraveling before the world's eyes, bit by bit, memory by memory? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It began quietly, almost too quietly. A forgotten name here. A misplaced date there. A stumble during a speech that once would have been effortless. To the public, these were small things, harmless even. But behind closed doors, inside the very core of Prince Harry's private life, alarm bells were ringing. Loudly, relentlessly. And now, the truth has broken through the polished veneer of royal silence. Prince Harry has been diagnosed with advanced stress-induced neurodegeneration. Yes, you heard that right. Not a rumor. Not tabloid fodder. According to multiple medical insiders, neurological specialists, and leaked reports from those within his inner circle, Prince Harry's brain is showing early signs of irreversible damage. And the cause, as reported by those closest to the case, is as tragic as it is damning. Chronic emotional distress, prolonged psychological abuse, and deep, deliberate isolation. Doctors sat him down. The mood was heavy. The air, cold with finality. And they told him, not with anger, not even with urgency, but with something far more painful, pity. You are living on borrowed time, one specialist allegedly said. Your condition has accelerated due to prolonged exposure to psychological trauma and manipulation. For a moment, Harry didn't speak. He couldn't. How could he? How does a man react when he's told the damage isn't only done, but that it's irreversible? That the person he has become, the man the world sees today, might not even remember who he is 10 years from now, maybe not even 5? What shattered him wasn't just the diagnosis, it was the realization that the world had been watching it all unfold, while he remained blind to what was happening to him. This isn't just a medical crisis. This is a royal tragedy unfolding in real time. And it begs the question, how did we get here? In the next few moments, you'll hear the full story. You'll learn about the confidential reports buried by PR teams, the desperate warnings ignored, the moments where Harry tried to speak up but was silenced, not just by those around him, but by someone much closer. Someone he trusted. Someone he loved. This is not just a story about Prince Harry's health. This is a story about betrayal, about manipulation, about the psychological war waged quietly, subtly, over years, until the damage was no longer deniable. Behind the luxury homes, Netflix deals, and red carpets was a man deteriorating. Not from drugs, not from disease, but from emotional starvation. From being cut off from the roots that once gave him strength, his family, his heritage, his identity. And now, with his diagnosis public, the questions are no longer whispered. They're being shouted from every corner of the media landscape. Was Prince Harry's downfall orchestrated? Did Meghan Markle knowingly keep him isolated from his own family? Did she suppress medical intervention to protect their joint image? And most terrifying of all, did she stand by as his mind began to break? You see, this story doesn't start with a doctor's diagnosis. It starts much earlier. Years back, when the cracks in Harry's armor were just beginning to show. But instead of being mended, they were widened by a woman who, some insiders claim, ensured that Harry never had access to real healing, only the illusion of it. When Harry left the royal family in 2020, he said he was seeking peace, freedom, a life beyond the suffocating grip of royal expectation. But what he found may have been something much worse, a gilded cage designed not to liberate him, but to silence him. From the moment he arrived in California, insiders say Harry began to change. Slowly at first, more anxious, more withdrawn. There were moments when friends noticed he seemed off, distracted, even confused. Staff at public events whispered that Harry wasn't himself, that he sometimes lost track of what he was saying mid-sentence, that he'd stare blankly before collecting his thoughts. Publicly, it was brushed off as stress. Privately, it was becoming harder to ignore. But Meghan reportedly refused to acknowledge it. According to one close associate, anytime Harry expressed concerns about his mental state or asked to speak with someone professionally, Meghan would either change the subject or insist that therapy would make him look unstable, dangerous, even for their brand. By the time Harry's condition worsened to the point where medical intervention became necessary, it was too late for prevention. Doctors now believe the trauma had been building for years, compounded by emotional manipulation, guilt-shaming, and repeated isolation from support systems that could have helped him. The palace has yet to make a formal statement, but sources within royal circles have described the atmosphere as one of shock and sorrow. Even Prince William, who has had little direct contact with his brother in recent years, is reportedly devastated. One insider claims William is now pushing for an urgent family summit to assess the possibility of getting Harry back to London for long-term care. The last time a royal was caught in such a storm, it was Diana. And now, it seems, her youngest son has become the tragic echo of her unfinished story. What happens when the walls close in? When the truth can no longer be buried beneath staged photo ops and carefully crafted statements? When a man loved by millions realizes he's been emotionally dismantled from the inside out? You're about to find out. This is the opening to a story no one wanted to tell, but one that now must be heard. This is the beginning of a royal unraveling. This is the beginning of the end. It began not with a dramatic collapse or a sudden episode, but with small, almost unnoticeable lapses. Moments that to most would appear as simple forgetfulness or exhaustion. Prince Harry would sometimes forget the names of people he'd known for years. At public events, he occasionally lost his train of thought in mid-sentence, forcing an awkward smile while trying to recover. In private settings, friends whispered about his increasing agitation, his mood swings, his habit of repeating stories he had already told the same day. At first, it was chalked up to stress. After all, who wouldn't be under pressure after leaving the royal family, moving halfway across the world, and exposing decades of secrets to an audience of millions? But the signs didn't stop. They intensified. The first real alarm was reportedly raised by a longtime friend who had flown to visit Harry in Montecito. According to sources close to the situation, the friend was disturbed by how detached Harry seemed. It wasn't like before, the source claimed. He seemed foggy, like he was present, but not really there. The friend noticed Harry struggled to follow conversations and often stared into the distance during discussions. By the end of the visit, they allegedly contacted a medical professional from the UK and urged Harry to be evaluated. It took months before Harry agreed to seek help. Meghan, insiders say, discouraged the idea at first. She was worried about how it would look, one source said. That Harry admitting he needed a neurological evaluation would destroy the image they had so carefully curated. Eventually, though, the symptoms became too severe to ignore. A team of specialists was brought in quietly. Security was tightened around their visit, and the press was kept completely in the dark. What they found, however, could not be hidden. According to leaked excerpts from the preliminary medical report, Prince Harry's brain scans revealed patterns consistent with early-onset neurodegeneration. More specifically, the doctors diagnosed him with advanced stress-induced neurological decline, an increasingly recognized condition linked to chronic psychological trauma, emotional instability, and prolonged exposure to manipulative or toxic environments. For Harry, the diagnosis was not only terrifying. It was humiliating. A prince, a former soldier, a husband and father, now forced to confront the reality that his mind was deteriorating at a pace far beyond what was considered normal for his age. The lead doctor, reportedly a renowned neuropsychologist who has consulted for high-profile trauma cases around the world, was blunt in his analysis. This level of cognitive and neurological wear is consistent with what we see in patients who've suffered long-term emotional trauma, especially when that trauma is repressed or unresolved. The report did not mince words. It stated clearly that the acceleration of Harry's condition was most likely intensified by sustained emotional suppression, lack of therapeutic engagement, and prolonged interpersonal conflict. In simpler terms, Harry's psychological pain hadn't just affected his emotions. It had begun to physically alter the function and structure of his brain. The news hit him like a hammer. For days afterward, insiders claim Harry remained almost entirely unresponsive. He barely spoke, a former staff member disclosed. He was in shock. Meghan kept saying it was overblown, that the doctors were exaggerating. But you could see in Harry's eyes, he knew it was real. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of the diagnosis was that Harry had likely been suffering in silence for years. Friends now recall warning signs dating back to 2019. Periods of withdrawal, emotional breakdowns, panic attacks behind the scenes, events that were explained away at the time as stress or lack of sleep. Looking back, it all seems so obvious. But at the time, no one dared to challenge the narrative. Dr. Alan Briston, a UK-based neurocognitive expert not involved in the case but familiar with the condition, explained it clearly. Stress-induced neurodegeneration is not pseudoscience. It's real. Repeated emotional trauma triggers hormonal and chemical responses that, over time, literally change how the brain works. Memory pathways weaken, emotional regulation collapses, and executive function, the ability to think clearly and make decisions, deteriorates. And it's especially dangerous in individuals who don't process trauma, or worse, who are prevented from doing so. The question then became, what or who was preventing Harry from processing his trauma? While doctors focused on treatment strategies, therapy, medication, neurocognitive exercises, the media storm brewing outside was unavoidable. News of Harry's declining health had begun to leak, slowly but steadily. A cryptic post here, a whispered comment there. And then, a tabloid broke the story. Royal Insider claims Prince Harry suffering neurological collapse. That headline triggered an avalanche. The Sussex PR team scrambled to respond. In official statements, they insisted Harry was simply taking a well-earned mental health break. But behind the scenes, Meghan was reportedly furious that the medical report had slipped. She wanted it buried, said a source who had worked on the couple's Netflix productions. She was terrified that the world would think Harry was weak, or worse, that he was unstable. Harry, however, was beginning to come to terms with the truth. And that truth was heavier than any royal title he had ever carried. What made the diagnosis especially damning wasn't just the nature of the condition, but the fact that it had progressed so far, so fast. Specialists noted that many of the physical symptoms, disorientation, memory lapse, mood dysregulation, were at a level more commonly found in patients over 65. Harry was just 40. This forced the doctors to draw an uncomfortable conclusion. Something or someone had exacerbated the decline. There was no biological explanation that could account for such an aggressive progression without an emotional catalyst. They listed contributing factors in their report: sustained stress, emotional suppression, conflict with close relations, identity loss, lack of therapeutic support. All arrows pointed to the same conclusion. Harry's life, post-royalty, was killing him, silently, invisibly, and rapidly. One chilling quote from the report, leaked through anonymous sources, has echoed across Royal Watch forums ever since. If intervention had taken place 3 years earlier, the prognosis might have been significantly different. As it stands, the outlook is concerning. Another doctor reportedly warned, he is not dying in the traditional sense, but pieces of him are dying each day. And unless something changes, there will come a point where those pieces can't be recovered. This is where the real tragedy lies, not just in the diagnosis, but in the timeline. The signs were there. The interventions were possible. The therapy was accessible. But again and again, Harry had been pulled away, pushed into distractions, encouraged to smile for the camera while bleeding inside. In a final private session with the medical team, Harry is said to have broken down in tears. "I feel like I've been erased," he allegedly told them. "Like I'm disappearing one piece at a time and no one noticed until now." And that, perhaps, is the most devastating part. He was screaming for help all along, but no one was listening. To hear the words, "living on borrowed time," is to confront an existential reality that few ever face so directly, especially someone as young and seemingly vibrant as Prince Harry. It's a phrase loaded with finality, a stark reminder that time, which once seemed endless, is now slipping away with an urgency that cannot be ignored. But what does it truly mean in the context of a medical diagnosis? And how does such a phrase come to define the life of a man only in his early 40s? When doctors told Harry he was living on borrowed time, they weren't using hyperbole or dramatic flair. They were speaking clinically about the progression of his neurological condition, a progression that, according to the reports, was moving faster than anticipated. Advanced stress-induced neurodegeneration doesn't follow the typical course of age-related decline. Instead, it attacks aggressively, eroding cognitive function, memory, emotional stability, and even personality with ruthless speed. In practical terms, this means that Harry's brain is undergoing changes usually seen in patients decades older. Structures responsible for memory retention and emotional regulation are deteriorating, leaving gaps in his cognition and creating vulnerabilities in his mental health that are difficult to manage. The phrase "borrowed time" underscores that without immediate and intensive intervention, these losses could become permanent. His ability to function independently, to communicate clearly, and even to connect emotionally with those around him could diminish rapidly. But this prognosis isn't just a clinical warning. It carries a deeper, more painful implication for Harry. It suggests that the life he has been trying to build, far away from the British monarchy, under the bright but unforgiving lights of Hollywood and global media, may be on a precarious precipice. The future he envisioned, full of freedom, love, and legacy, is now clouded by the reality that his own mind may betray him before his time. Understanding borrowed time requires us to look beyond the medical jargon and into the daily lived experience of someone facing such a diagnosis. Imagine waking up each day uncertain whether you will remember where you placed your keys, the name of a loved one, or even the simplest details of your schedule. Imagine the fear that grips you when familiar faces start to seem strange, when conversations become overwhelming puzzles, and when the world that once felt solid and secure begins to blur and shift beneath your feet. Friends close to Harry have reportedly shared that these fears are not abstract for him. They are very real. Private conversations reveal a man grappling with a sense of loss, confusion, and growing isolation. Despite his efforts to maintain a public image of strength and composure, those closest to him see a different story, one of vulnerability, pain, and a desperate search for normalcy. The psychological impact of knowing you are living on borrowed time is profound. It forces a reckoning with mortality that most people never have to face so early. For Harry, who has spent much of his life in the spotlight, it also raises questions about legacy and identity. Who will he be when the memories fade? What will remain of the man who once served in Afghanistan, who married the love of his life, who dreamed of a future filled with hope and purpose? Medical experts familiar with cases like Harry's emphasize that the concept of borrowed time is not a death sentence in the immediate sense, but rather a call to urgent action. Interventions such as cognitive therapy, lifestyle changes, and supportive care can slow the progression. However, these measures require acknowledgement of the condition, a commitment to treatment, and crucially, a supportive environment, elements that have reportedly been missing or obstructed in Harry's life. This leads to a haunting question. How much of Harry's decline could have been prevented with earlier intervention and a stronger support network? And how much has been exacerbated by the emotional and psychological isolation he has endured? Living on borrowed time also affects relationships. Loved ones must navigate the delicate balance between support and loss, hope and reality. For Harry, this dynamic is complicated by the fractured state of his family ties. The physical distance from his family in the UK, combined with reported estrangement, has left him without the traditional support structures that might have offered comfort and assistance during this crisis. Instead, sources suggest that Harry has been increasingly reliant on a small inner circle, one that some insiders claim has not always had his best interests at heart. This isolation reportedly deepened after his move to California, where the glittering surface of celebrity life masked a growing internal struggle. Neurologists explain that the brain's ability to adapt and compensate can be remarkable, but only up to a point. Once the damage passes a critical threshold, borrowed time becomes more literal, meaning the clock is ticking louder, and the window for meaningful recovery narrows drastically. This reality has weighed heavily on Harry's mental health. Accounts from close aides describe moments when he is broken down in tears, overwhelmed by the uncertainty of his future. The man who once faced combat with courage is now confronting an enemy within, a relentless degeneration that no armor can protect against. In private, Harry reportedly asked his doctors difficult questions. How long do I have? What will I lose first? Will I still be able to be a good husband and father? These are not questions that anyone wants to hear or answer, yet they are central to understanding the emotional gravity behind the diagnosis. The sense of urgency is compounded by the fact that neurological diseases, especially those linked to stress and trauma, can worsen without treatment. The longer symptoms are ignored or suppressed, the greater the damage. Every delay in therapy, every refusal to seek help, chips away at the hope. Living on borrowed time also forces a man to reflect on his past. For Harry, this includes the emotional wounds inflicted during childhood, the loss of his mother, Princess Diana, his turbulent relationship with the royal family, and years of public scrutiny. These are not merely background details. They are central to the trauma doctors say has accelerated his condition. Experts note that unresolved grief and ongoing psychological abuse create a toxic environment for brain health. Harry's diagnosis is, in many ways, a biological record of the emotional storms he has weathered. But there is another layer to this story, one that involves the person many see as the architect of his isolation. Meghan Markle, his wife, is frequently mentioned in leaked reports as a significant factor in Harry's psychological decline. Allegations suggest that she isolated him from family and friends, discouraged therapy, and exerted a controlling influence that deepened his emotional wounds. Whether these claims are fully true remains a matter of intense debate and dispute, but what cannot be denied is the impact of prolonged emotional stress on Harry's condition. In the coming chapters, we will explore these dynamics in greater detail, unpack the timeline of decline, and reveal the profound consequences of living on borrowed time. For now, understand this. To be told you are living on borrowed time is not just to face a medical prognosis. It is to confront the fragility of life itself, the weight of past wounds, and the urgent need for healing before it is too late. Behind the glittering headlines, lavish red carpets, and perfectly staged public appearances lies a darker, hidden story. One that reveals a man trapped in a web of psychological abuse so subtle and pervasive that it took years for anyone outside his closest circle to even suspect its existence. For Prince Harry, this abuse didn't come from the public or the press. It came from someone who was supposed to be his partner, his confidant, the person he trusted most, Meghan Markle. Understanding psychological abuse requires peeling back layers of manipulation, control, and isolation that often go unnoticed by outsiders. It is not marked by visible bruises or broken bones, but by emotional wounds that slowly erode a person's sense of self, autonomy, and well-being. Experts describe it as a form of covert violence, one that uses gaslighting, guilt-tripping, and constant undermining to dominate and silence its victim. Friends and insiders close to Harry have painted a picture of a man slowly being drained of his strength and identity. According to several accounts, Meghan's influence extended far beyond mere spousal support. She allegedly orchestrated a systematic campaign to isolate Harry from his family, restrict his access to therapists and medical professionals, and suppress any attempts he made to seek help. One former aide revealed, Harry was being pushed into a corner. Every time he tried to reach out, it was like hitting a wall. Meghan would dismiss his concerns or accuse him of being weak or disloyal. Over time, it became clear that he was losing his voice, his ability to speak up for himself. Gaslighting, making someone question their reality, is a hallmark of psychological abuse. Several sources suggest Meghan employed this tactic expertly, convincing Harry that his feelings of distress were irrational or exaggerated. When Harry expressed anxiety or depression, he was reportedly told to toughen up, or that his family's criticism was part of a plot to undermine their relationship. Isolation is another powerful tool in the abuser's arsenal. Harry, once surrounded by a robust support network of family and friends, found himself increasingly cut off. Phone calls with William and Charles became strained or were blocked entirely. Invitations to family events went unanswered. Trusted confidants noticed that Harry's social circle shrank rapidly, replaced by a tight-knit group loyal primarily to Meghan. The effect was devastating. Human beings are social creatures, and isolation compounds the effects of trauma. Without emotional anchors, the brain becomes vulnerable to spiraling anxiety, depression, and in Harry's case, neurological decline. Therapy, which might have offered a lifeline, was reportedly discouraged or sabotaged. Sources claim Meghan viewed therapy as a threat to their carefully managed public image. If Harry went to therapy, it would look like they had problems, a former staffer explained. So sessions were canceled, appointments forgotten, or never scheduled in the first place. This suppression of mental health support not only deepened Harry's emotional wounds, but also allowed his condition to worsen unchecked. Furthermore, Meghan's alleged control extended to managing Harry's public narrative. Every interview, every public statement, every social media post was carefully crafted to present a united front, a happy couple rising above adversity. Behind the scenes, however, the cracks were widening. Those closest to Harry say that his smiles at events became increasingly forced, his eyes reflecting exhaustion rather than joy. At private gatherings, he would retreat, avoid eye contact, and sometimes leave early without explanation. Staff and friends grew concerned but felt powerless. Psychological abuse is often invisible because victims are made to feel responsible for the problems. Harry, by all accounts, internalized this blame. He wrestled with feelings of guilt and shame, believing that if only he were stronger or more supportive, the tensions would ease. Such self-blame is a common and tragic consequence of emotional manipulation. Experts warn that prolonged exposure to psychological abuse can trigger a cascade of health issues, including hormonal imbalances, immune system dysfunction, and accelerated brain aging. For someone already vulnerable from past trauma, like the loss of his mother and intense media scrutiny, the effects can be catastrophic. Psychologist Dr. Maria Lewis, who specializes in trauma and abuse, explains, victims often describe feeling trapped in a relationship where their needs and boundaries are ignored. Over time, this chronic stress changes brain chemistry, particularly in areas responsible for memory, emotional regulation, and decision-making. In Harry's case, these changes likely contributed directly to the neurological damage revealed in his diagnosis. The silence surrounding the abuse has been maintained by a combination of fear, loyalty, and a desire to protect reputations. Royal aides and family members reportedly struggled with how to address the situation without igniting further public scandal. One insider lamented, "We wanted to help Harry, but we were walking on eggshells." Any attempt to intervene was met with resistance or denial. The alleged psychological abuse was compounded by a media environment that often painted Harry as unstable or troubled, reinforcing his feelings of isolation. While Meghan received a complex mix of praise and criticism, Harry was frequently depicted as a man spiraling out of control, a narrative that insiders say was unfair and damaging. This toxic cycle of abuse, isolation, and public pressure created a perfect storm that no amount of willpower could withstand. It is important to note that Meghan's supporters vehemently deny these allegations, portraying her as a devoted partner fighting alongside Harry against a hostile royal institution and press. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. A complex interplay of personalities, pressures, and unmet needs. Nevertheless, the impact on Harry's mental and physical health is undeniable. Psychological abuse, especially when combined with other stressors, leaves deep scars. By the time Harry sought medical help, the damage was already extensive. Experts say that recovery from such abuse requires more than therapy. It demands a safe, supportive environment, genuine reconciliation, and time. For Harry, the path to healing is complicated by ongoing conflicts, public scrutiny, and the very real possibility that some relationships may never be repaired. As we continue this story, it becomes clear that the psychological abuse Harry endured was not an isolated episode, but part of a broader pattern that has shaped his life, his health, and his future. To truly understand the depth of Prince Harry's struggle, one must trace the timeline of his mental and emotional decline. A slow, painful unraveling that stretched over several years and passed largely unnoticed by the public eye. While the headlines focused on his departure from royal duties, his marriage, and his media ventures, behind the scenes a far more serious crisis was unfolding: the gradual deterioration of a man's mental health, compounded by isolation and psychological turmoil. The story begins in 2016, a pivotal year for Harry. This was the year he publicly announced his engagement to Meghan Markle, a moment that was initially greeted with widespread enthusiasm and hope. Yet, it also marked the beginning of increased media scrutiny and pressure, both from the British press and an international audience. Harry's life was no longer his own. Every word, gesture, and appearance was dissected in detail. By 2017, subtle changes were reported by close friends and aides. Harry became more withdrawn, visibly anxious in public settings. At a charity event that year, an observer noted he appeared distracted and not fully present. The stress of adjusting to a new life in the public spotlight with Meghan, coupled with ongoing family tensions, seemed to weigh heavily on him. Throughout 2018, the cracks widened. The couple married in a lavish ceremony watched by millions, but the joy was tempered by reports of tension behind the scenes. Insiders whispered about disagreements, clashes with palace staff, and a growing rift between Harry and other family members. It was during this period that Harry began to experience mood swings and signs of emotional exhaustion. Several confidential messages leaked to the press hinted at personal struggles, but these were dismissed as typical pressures of celebrity life. The following year, 2019, saw an escalation. Harry publicly spoke about his mental health in candid interviews, breaking taboos around male vulnerability. However, behind the scenes, his condition was reportedly worsening. Friends noticed he was canceling social engagements, avoiding contact with his brother William, and exhibiting signs of anxiety and depression. During a retreat in early 2019, A close confidant reported that Harry broke down in tears, expressing feelings of loneliness and despair. In 2020, the seismic shift occurred. Harry and Meghan announced their decision to step back from royal duties, a move unprecedented in modern royal history. While hailed by some as an act of liberation, it also isolated the couple further from the support systems that might have helped stabilize Harry's health. The transition to life in California was fraught with challenges, cultural adjustments, relentless media attention, and the pressures of building a new identity outside the monarchy. Sources close to the couple describe a period of intense stress and instability throughout 2020 and 2021. Harry struggled to balance public expectations with private turmoil. Reports emerge of disagreements between Harry and Meghan over their public messaging and business deals. Simultaneously, his neurological symptoms began to manifest more clearly: forgetfulness, disorientation, mood fluctuations, though these were still mostly concealed from the public. The watershed moment came in 2022 when Harry finally agreed to undergo neurological evaluation. According to insiders, this was after months of denial and resistance, fueled by Meghan's alleged reluctance to acknowledge the severity of his condition. Medical tests revealed significant signs of brain changes consistent with stress-induced neurodegeneration. The news devastated Harry and marked the beginning of a more urgent medical and personal crisis. Throughout 2023, efforts were made to manage his condition discreetly. Medical teams recommended therapy, lifestyle adjustments, and family involvement. However, fractures within the family remained, with reports of limited communication between Harry and the royal household. Publicly, Harry continued to engage in media projects, masking the gravity of his health behind carefully scripted appearances. By early 2024, insiders say Harry's symptoms worsened, with more frequent episodes of memory lapse and emotional instability. Several planned public appearances were canceled last minute due to health concerns. The once vibrant and energetic prince appeared increasingly fragile, prompting renewed concern from both medical professionals and those close to him. Throughout this timeline, the psychological and emotional strain played a critical role in accelerating Harry's decline. Experts emphasize that chronic stress and unresolved trauma have a cumulative effect on brain health, causing deterioration far more rapidly than genetic or age-related factors alone. When examining the timeline, a pattern emerges. Moments of hope and progress were consistently undermined by setbacks, many of which were linked to interpersonal conflicts and a lack of cohesive support. The push-pull between independence and isolation, public visibility and private pain, created a volatile environment that was ultimately detrimental to Harry's well-being. In summary, the timeline of Harry's decline is a cautionary tale about the dangers of neglecting mental health, the destructive power of psychological abuse, and the high cost of isolation. It is a story not just of a prince, but of any person caught in a toxic relationship or pressured by circumstances beyond their control. As we continue, the focus will turn to how those closest to Harry responded, or failed to respond, to this escalating crisis, setting the stage for the next chapter: royal family's reaction to the news. News travels fast within royal circles, but when it concerns something as sensitive as a family member's health, especially a condition as serious and complicated as advanced stress-induced neurodegeneration, the response is often layered with a mix of shock, concern, and strategic silence. The revelation of Prince Harry's diagnosis sent ripples through the royal family, exposing not only personal anguish but also the complex dynamics that have defined their relationships for years. Within hours of the initial medical reports leaking, senior members of the royal household convened private meetings to discuss the implications. The atmosphere was somber, the weight of the news heavy on everyone's shoulders. King Charles III, known for his compassionate but reserved demeanor, reportedly expressed deep sorrow for his son's condition. Those close to the king said he was visibly shaken but determined to find a way to support Harry, despite the distance and strained relations. Prince William's reaction was more complex. Sources describe him as devastated but also conflicted. The brothers' relationship had been fragile for years, strained by the public fallout following Harry and Meghan's departure from official royal duties. While William reportedly wanted to offer support, long-standing grievances and misunderstandings complicated his ability to fully reach out. An insider close to William explained, "He loves his brother and is deeply concerned, but there's a lot of hurt and anger that hasn't been resolved. It's difficult to know how to move forward when so much has been left unsaid." Despite these tensions, there was reportedly an urgent push within the family to arrange a reunion or at least establish better lines of communication. The hope was that bringing Harry back into the fold, even temporarily, could aid in his recovery and provide access to resources unavailable elsewhere. Princess and other senior royals also expressed concern. Known for her straightforward approach, and was said to advocate for a pragmatic plan focused on Harry's health rather than public image. This was a notable shift from previous years when the family's priorities often leaned toward protecting the monarchy's reputation at all costs. Behind closed doors, palace aides worked diligently to manage the fallout. Damage control teams sought to contain media speculation, urging discretion and compassion in public statements. Official communications described Harry's condition as a private family matter, emphasizing their commitment to supporting him while respecting his privacy. However, royal commentators noted the difficulty of maintaining this balance in an era dominated by 24/7 news cycles and social media scrutiny. The public's fascination with Harry and Meghan meant that every development was magnified, making it impossible to keep the story fully contained. Adding another layer of complexity was Meghan Markle's role in the family's reaction. While some royals reportedly viewed her as a protective partner doing her best under difficult circumstances, others saw her as a divisive figure whose actions may have contributed to Harry's isolation and deteriorating health. Sources suggest that Meghan's presence in California created logistical challenges for family visits and medical consultations. The distance, combined with reported friction between her and other family members, complicated efforts to coordinate care. A palace insider remarked, "It's not just about physical distance. There's emotional distance too, and that's harder to bridge." Despite these challenges, there were glimpses of goodwill. Several royal aides reportedly made discreet efforts to maintain contact with Harry's team, offering support and resources. Charitable organizations connected to the family also expressed readiness to assist, hoping to leverage their networks for Harry's benefit. Experts analyzing the royal family's reaction note that while the initial response was compassionate, long-standing family dynamics and public pressures have made a unified approach difficult. The split between Harry and the monarchy, exacerbated by past controversies and public disputes, means that healing personal relationships will be as important as managing the medical condition itself. The reaction also highlighted the evolving role of the monarchy in dealing with personal crises. Unlike previous generations, today's royals face unprecedented public scrutiny and media transparency, forcing them to navigate private pain in a very public arena. As the story unfolds, it will be critical to watch how the royal family balances tradition with the need for openness, and how this balance affects Harry's path to recovery. In the next chapter, we will explore the role of Meghan Markle in greater detail, examining allegations of isolation, control, and the impact on Harry's health. In any deeply personal and complex story, especially one involving public figures like Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, it is critical to approach the narrative with nuance. Meghan's role in Harry's life, and particularly in the context of his health decline, has been a subject of intense debate, speculation, and polarized opinions. Is she a devoted protector shielding him from harm, or a controlling figure whose actions contributed to his emotional and neurological deterioration? The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between, layered with contradictions, motivations, and human complexities. From the beginning of their relationship, Meghan was seen by many as a transformative influence on Harry. She introduced new perspectives, passions, and ambitions into his life. Her background as an American actress and activist brought a fresh energy that invigorated the prince, who was grappling with his identity and role within the royal family. Publicly, they appeared as a united front, challenging royal conventions and advocating for mental health, social justice, and personal freedom. However, as time passed, cracks began to appear beneath the polished veneer. Insider reports suggest Meghan's protective instincts occasionally crossed into controlling behavior, particularly when it came to managing Harry's public image and private interactions. Friends and former staff have recounted instances where Meghan was said to discourage Harry from engaging with family members or therapists, believing that such contacts threatened their autonomy and narrative. One former aide explained she wanted to keep control over every aspect of Harry's life, from who he spoke to what he said, to how he presented himself publicly. It was exhausting for him, but he went along with it because he trusted her. Critics argue that this control extended beyond image management into emotional manipulation. Allegations include accusations of gaslighting, where Meghan reportedly made Harry doubt his perceptions and feelings, blaming him for conflicts or emotional struggles. Such tactics, if true, would have profound implications for Harry's mental health, exacerbating anxiety and depression. On the other hand, Meghan's supporters insist that much of this portrayal is the result of biased media coverage and palace intrigues designed to undermine her influence. They emphasize her dedication to Harry's well-being, noting that she has been his steadfast advocate amid hostile media attacks and family tensions. Public statements from Meghan highlight her commitment to mental health awareness and personal healing. Yet, the leaked medical reports and insider testimonies suggest a more complicated reality. Harry's diagnosis of advanced stress-induced neurodegeneration implicates prolonged psychological trauma, which experts say can result from both external pressures and toxic interpersonal relationships. The allegations that Meghan suppressed therapy sessions or discouraged medical intervention are particularly troubling. Therapists who specialize in trauma and abuse have weighed in on the case, noting that controlling partners often fear therapy because it exposes underlying dysfunction and shifts power dynamics. Preventing or limiting access to mental health support can trap victims in harmful situations, accelerating psychological and physical decline. Furthermore, Meghan's alleged role in isolating Harry from his family has been cited as a key factor in his worsening condition. Sources describe how phone calls with William and Charles became increasingly rare and strained, with Meghan reportedly influencing Harry to distance himself to avoid perceived conflicts or criticism. While boundaries in family relationships are normal, enforced isolation can be detrimental, cutting off critical emotional support. This isolation is particularly damaging when combined with the intense public scrutiny Harry faces. Without the buffering effect of a supportive family network, the stress compounds, feeding into a vicious cycle of trauma and neurological damage. It is also important to consider Meghan's own experiences and pressures. As a woman of color navigating the predominantly white, tradition-bound British monarchy, she faced unique challenges, including public hostility, racism, and media vilification. These factors likely influenced her protective stance toward Harry, shaping how she managed their personal and public lives. The intersection of these dynamics creates a fraught and emotionally charged environment. Meghan's efforts to protect Harry could have inadvertently contributed to his isolation and suppressed opportunities for healing. Conversely, the palace's treatment of Meghan may have intensified tensions and undermined family support. This chapter also explores how Meghan's ambitions, personal, professional, and philanthropic, may have clashed with Harry's health needs. Their joint ventures, from Netflix deals to public appearances, demanded energy and attention, sometimes at odds with the rest and privacy Harry required. Balancing the demands of celebrity life with chronic health challenges is difficult under any circumstances. For Harry, it was made harder by the complex relationship dynamics. Interviews with insiders reveal moments of tenderness and genuine care between the couple, underscoring that their relationship is not simply one-dimensional. Meghan reportedly encouraged Harry to seek help at times and was supportive during some medical consultations. However, these instances coexist with accounts of control and suppression, reflecting the contradictory nature of human relationships. Mental health professionals consulted on this story emphasize the importance of seeing this through a trauma-informed lens, recognizing that both victim and partner can be caught in cycles of abuse, defense, and survival. In the final analysis, Meghan's role in Harry's health crisis cannot be reduced to villain or savior. Instead, it must be understood as a complex interplay of love, control, trauma, and external pressures. The consequences for Harry's neurological and emotional well-being are undeniable, but they are the product of many forces converging over time. This nuanced understanding opens the door to healing, not only for Harry, but also for the fractured relationships around him. As the narrative unfolds, the next chapter will examine Harry's personal struggles with identity, mental health, and public perception, painting a fuller picture of the man behind the headlines. The story of Prince Harry is as much about a man's internal struggle as it is about external forces conspiring against him. Beneath the public headlines, royal duties, and media spectacles lies a deeply personal battle, one involving identity, mental health, and the relentless gaze of the world. This chapter peels back the layers of Harry's experience to reveal the profound challenges he has faced trying to reconcile who he is with who the world expects him to be. From his earliest years, Harry's life was shaped by contradictions. Born into one of the most scrutinized families on earth, he grew up with the weight of legacy pressing down on him. Yet he also exhibited a rebellious streak, seeking to forge his own path separate from royal expectations. His military service was a manifestation of that desire, an attempt to prove himself beyond titles and privileges. Mental health struggles surfaced early and publicly for Harry. The tragic death of his mother, Princess Diana, when he was just 12, left an indelible mark. In interviews and documentaries, Harry has openly described grappling with grief and trauma, saying he didn't know how to process his pain. The royal family's traditional silence around mental health only intensified his isolation. Over time, Harry's candidness about his mental health became a hallmark of his public persona. He used his platform to break down stigma, encouraging others to seek help. However, this openness was a double-edged sword. While many praised his vulnerability, critics accused him of oversharing or exploiting personal struggles for attention. The intense scrutiny that followed only compounded his anxiety. Harry's marriage to Meghan Markle was a turning point in his identity journey. He embraced a new life away from royal conventions, advocating for causes close to his heart and exploring roles beyond his royal duties. Yet, this reinvention also brought tension. Balancing personal authenticity with public expectation proved challenging. The psychological toll of living under constant media scrutiny cannot be overstated. Every action, word, and gesture is analyzed, often twisted to fit narratives of dysfunction or scandal. This environment fosters a sense of paranoia and self-doubt. Sources close to Harry describe his constant vigilance, his efforts to anticipate attacks, and his struggle to maintain mental equilibrium. At the same time, Harry battled feelings of betrayal and abandonment, especially regarding his family. The public fallout with Prince William and the Queen weighed heavily on him. Reports reveal that Harry felt misunderstood and unsupported during critical moments, deepening his sense of alienation. Mental health professionals highlight how such profound feelings of loss and identity crisis can trigger or worsen neurological conditions. Stress hormones flood the brain, damaging cells and impairing function. For Harry, this meant that his internal battles were not just emotional but also physiological. Despite these challenges, Harry sought meaning and purpose. His philanthropic work, public speaking, and media ventures reflect a man striving to transform pain into positive action. Yet the pressures of this public-facing role sometimes clashed with his need for privacy and healing. Friends recount moments when Harry seemed exhausted by the performance required of him, yearning for simpler, quieter times. The contrast between his public image and private reality created tension and fatigue. This duality between who Harry is and who he's expected to be forms the core of his inner battle. Navigating identity in the spotlight is a complex endeavor, requiring constant negotiation between vulnerability and strength, openness and discretion. Adding to this complexity is Harry's evolving relationship with the British monarchy. His departure from royal duties symbolized both liberation and loss, a severing of ties that offered freedom but also deepened isolation. This separation left Harry to confront his mental health without the usual family supports, heightening vulnerability. The narrative surrounding Harry's mental health is further complicated by misinformation and speculation. False reports, exaggerated claims, and partisan narratives have muddied the waters, making it harder for Harry to receive empathy and support. Despite these obstacles, Harry has demonstrated resilience and a desire for healing. His recent willingness to discuss his diagnosis publicly signals a new chapter, one of acceptance and advocacy. This chapter underscores that Harry's journey is not just about a medical condition but about the universal human struggle for identity, belonging, and mental well-being amid adversity. In the following chapter, we will delve into the medical details of Harry's diagnosis, exploring the science behind stress-induced neurodegeneration and its impact on the brain. The human brain is an astonishing organ, capable of incredible feats, from creating art to solving complex problems to storing memories that define who we are. Yet it is also extraordinarily vulnerable, especially when subjected to prolonged stress and emotional trauma. Prince Harry's diagnosis of advanced stress-induced neurodegeneration brings into focus a critical and often misunderstood medical condition, one that illustrates how the mind and body are deeply intertwined. Stress-induced neurodegeneration refers to the progressive loss of structure or function of neurons caused or accelerated by chronic psychological stress. Unlike genetic neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, this condition stems primarily from environmental and emotional factors that damage the brain over time. Scientific research has increasingly shown that chronic stress triggers a cascade of biological changes harmful to the brain. The body's stress response, while essential for survival in short bursts, becomes toxic when activated continuously. Prolonged release of stress hormones, especially cortisol, can shrink the hippocampus, the brain region responsible for memory and emotional regulation, and impair connections in the prefrontal cortex, which governs decision-making and impulse control. Neuroimaging studies reveal that patients suffering from stress-induced brain damage exhibit reduced gray matter volume and disrupted neural networks. These changes correlate with cognitive decline, memory loss, mood disorders, and diminished executive functioning. Symptoms reported by Harry and confirmed by medical scans. The pathophysiology is complex. Stress hormones affect brain cells directly and indirectly by promoting inflammation, oxidative stress, and vascular damage. This creates a hostile environment for neurons, accelerating cell death and reducing neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and repair itself. Experts emphasize that stress-induced neurodegeneration is preventable and, to some extent, reversible if caught early and managed effectively. Interventions include psychotherapy, medication, lifestyle modifications like exercise and diet, and social support. However, the longer the stress persists, the more difficult it becomes to halt or reverse damage. Harry's case is particularly challenging due to the nature and duration of his psychological stress. From childhood trauma to ongoing emotional abuse and public scrutiny, his brain has endured a relentless assault over decades. The added factor of isolation and suppression of therapy, as alleged, would only have compounded the damage. Neurologist Dr. Alan Reed explains, the brain's resilience has limits. Chronic emotional trauma can wear down those protective mechanisms, leading to premature aging and neurodegenerative processes similar to those seen in older adults. Symptoms of this condition often begin subtly. Patients might notice occasional forgetfulness, difficulty concentrating, mood swings, or disrupted sleep. Over time, these symptoms worsen, affecting daily functioning and quality of life. For Harry, these early signs reportedly included memory lapses during public events, moments of confusion in interviews, and emotional volatility. These were often masked by his public persona, but closely observed by those around him. A key challenge in diagnosis is distinguishing stress-induced neurodegeneration from other neurological disorders. Comprehensive assessments involve neuropsychological testing, brain imaging such as MRI or PET scans, and detailed clinical histories. In Harry's case, these tests confirmed accelerated brain aging consistent with chronic stress exposure. Treatment plans focus on holistic care. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, helps patients develop coping mechanisms for stress and trauma. Medications may address symptoms like anxiety or depression but are not cures for the underlying damage. Physical activity stimulates neurogenesis, the creation of new brain cells, and enhances cognitive reserve. Importantly, social connection and emotional support are vital. Isolation, as experienced by Harry, is a significant risk factor for worsening neurodegeneration. Reintegration into supportive networks can stabilize symptoms and promote recovery. The diagnosis also highlights broader societal issues regarding mental health stigma and access to care. Many individuals suffering from stress-related brain conditions delay seeking help due to shame or fear. In Harry's world, this is compounded by the pressures of royalty and celebrity. This chapter also examines parallels between Harry's condition and other public figures who have spoken openly about brain health linked to stress and trauma. Their stories shed light on the challenges and possibilities of managing such diagnoses. Researchers continue to explore novel therapies, including neuroprotective drugs and brain stimulation techniques, offering hope for the future. However, the cornerstone of treatment remains addressing the root causes, reducing stress, healing trauma, and rebuilding connections. Harry's diagnosis serves as a powerful reminder that no one is immune to the toll of psychological distress. It calls for greater awareness, compassion, and support for those facing similar struggles, regardless of status. As we move forward, the next chapter will focus on the efforts to support Harry, medical interventions, family involvement, and the quest for healing. Recovery from advanced stress-induced neurodegeneration is neither straightforward nor guaranteed. It demands a comprehensive, multi-layered approach that addresses not only the neurological symptoms but also the underlying psychological, emotional, and social factors. For Prince Harry, the journey toward healing is complicated by the public nature of his condition, the fractured relationships surrounding him, and the persistent pressures of his high-profile life. The first and most crucial step in the road to recovery is medical intervention. After Harry's diagnosis was confirmed through extensive neurological assessments, a team of specialists came together to formulate a tailored treatment plan. This multidisciplinary approach included neurologists, psychiatrists, psychologists, and rehabilitative therapists. Their goal was to stabilize his condition, alleviate symptoms, and provide strategies to slow further degeneration. One of the key elements in Harry's care was cognitive rehabilitation. This involves structured exercises designed to improve memory, attention, and problem-solving skills. Speech therapists and occupational therapists also played roles in helping Harry regain daily functioning and communication abilities that were impacted by his condition. In parallel, psychotherapy was emphasized as essential. Trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR, and mindfulness-based stress reduction techniques were integrated into Harry's regimen. These therapies aimed to help him process unresolved emotional trauma, develop healthier coping mechanisms, and reduce the chronic stress contributing to his brain damage. Medication was used selectively to manage symptoms such as anxiety, depression, and sleep disturbances. However, doctors were cautious to avoid over-reliance on pharmacological treatments, given the risk of side effects and the need for holistic healing. Lifestyle changes were another critical component. Harry was encouraged to adopt a balanced diet rich in antioxidants and omega-3 fatty acids, known to support brain health. Regular physical exercise, particularly aerobic activities like walking and swimming, was prescribed to promote neurogenesis and improve cardiovascular function. Importantly, social reconnection formed a cornerstone of recovery. Rebuilding relationships with family, friends, and support groups was vital to reducing isolation and enhancing emotional well-being. This required delicate negotiations, given the complicated dynamics between Harry, Meghan, and the royal family. Despite initial resistance, Harry's support network gradually expanded. Close family members made efforts to bridge gaps, attending private meetings and offering their presence during medical appointments. Trusted friends provided companionship and encouragement, helping him navigate the challenges of daily life. Publicly, Harry has used his platform to raise awareness about mental health and neurodegeneration, transforming his personal struggle into advocacy. This activism serves a dual purpose: raising funds and resources for research and destigmatizing brain health conditions. Nevertheless, the road to recovery is ongoing and fraught with obstacles. Progress is often slow and nonlinear, with periods of improvement followed by setbacks. The emotional toll of living with a degenerative condition in the public eye adds pressure that complicates healing. Support systems must remain flexible and responsive. Harry's medical team continues to monitor his condition closely, adjusting treatments as needed. Innovations in neuroscience offer hope, but no cure currently exists for stress-induced neurodegeneration. Beyond medical care, healing requires forgiveness and reconciliation. Family therapists have suggested that mending broken relationships could significantly enhance Harry's emotional resilience and aid neurological recovery. Whether such reconciliation will be possible remains uncertain. This chapter underscores the complexity of recovering from a condition as multifaceted as Harry's. It is a process that requires patience, compassion, and a commitment to holistic well-being. In the next chapter, we will examine the broader implications of Harry's diagnosis for mental health awareness and how his story might inspire change in public perceptions and support systems. Prince Harry's diagnosis and the public revelation of his health struggles have reverberated far beyond the walls of royal residences and medical clinics. His journey has become a powerful catalyst for greater awareness and conversation about mental health, neurological disorders, and the often overlooked consequences of psychological trauma. This chapter explores how Harry's story is influencing public perception, reducing stigma, and inspiring systemic change. Mental health has long been a taboo subject, particularly among men and within traditionally stoic institutions like the British monarchy. Harry's openness about his vulnerabilities challenges entrenched norms and offers a new narrative. One where acknowledging mental illness is not a sign of weakness but a step toward healing and empowerment. Since Harry began speaking candidly about his struggles, mental health organizations worldwide have reported increased engagement and interest. Campaigns aimed at promoting early intervention and emotional support have gained momentum, leveraging Harry's visibility to reach diverse audiences. His case also highlights the critical link between chronic stress, trauma, and neurological decline, encouraging a more holistic understanding of brain health. Medical professionals point to Harry's diagnosis as an example of how emotional and psychological factors can manifest physically, urging greater integration of mental health services within neurological care. Moreover, Harry's experience sheds light on the importance of social support and family dynamics in recovery. His story illustrates how isolation and strained relationships can exacerbate illness, emphasizing the need for compassionate community networks. Public reaction has been largely sympathetic, though not without controversy. Supporters commend Harry's courage and advocate for increased funding for mental health research and treatment. Critics question the public airing of private struggles, reflecting ongoing discomfort around mental illness in the public sphere. Media coverage has been mixed, ranging from respectful and informative to sensationalist and intrusive. This dichotomy underscores the challenges celebrities face when their personal health becomes public discourse. Harry's use of his platform to promote mental health initiatives, including partnerships with charities and educational campaigns, represents a proactive effort to transform personal adversity into social good. His story encourages others facing similar challenges to seek help and share their experiences. Additionally, the royal family's handling of Harry's diagnosis has sparked conversations about the institution's evolving approach to mental health. Observers note a gradual shift toward openness and support, signaling potential cultural change within the monarchy and beyond. On a societal level, Harry's journey contributes to dismantling stigma, particularly among men, who statistically are less likely to seek mental health support. His vulnerability provides a relatable example, showing that even those perceived as strong or privileged are not immune. The impact extends to healthcare policy discussions. Advocates cite Harry's case when lobbying for integrated mental and neurological health services, increased funding for trauma-informed care, and improved access to therapy. Educational programs are incorporating lessons from high-profile cases like Harry's to promote awareness from an early age, fostering resilience and emotional literacy. However, the chapter also acknowledges the limitations of celebrity influence. While Harry's story is significant, lasting change requires systemic reform, cultural shifts, and sustained advocacy. Finally, this chapter reflects on the power of storytelling and healing, how sharing experiences can build community, reduce isolation, and inspire hope. Harry's openness about his health is a testament to the human spirit's capacity for resilience and transformation. His journey serves not only as a personal battle, but as a beacon for millions navigating their own mental health challenges. As we proceed, the next chapter will explore the future outlook for Harry, his hopes, plans, and the support structures necessary to sustain his recovery and well-being. Prince Harry has been diagnosed with advanced stress-induced neurodegeneration, a condition typically seen in much older patients. Medical insiders say the cause isn't genetic or random. It's the result of years of psychological abuse, emotional isolation, and suppressed cries for help. According to confidential reports, Harry's own wife, Meghan Markle, allegedly cut him off from his family, discouraged therapy, and stood by as his mental state unraveled. In this exclusive exposé, we reveal the shocking findings from brain scans, leaked testimony from close insiders, and the heartbreaking moment doctors delivered the devastating news. This isn't just a health scare. It's the slow, silent breakdown of a prince in plain sight.